The movie opens with a man narrating a story from a long time ago when a small Russian village lived in fear of a fierce dragon. To calm the beast, the villagers performed dark rituals, such as offering young maidens as sacrifices and singing an ancient song to summon the dragon. But one day, after the dragon took a maiden, her lover, who was a valiant knight, was heartbroken and set out to find her. When he finally reached the dragon's island, he discovered she was already dead, shattering his spirit. The enraged knight then fought the dragon in a brutal battle and ultimately killed the beast. From that day on, he was known as the Dragon Slayer, and the village's grim ritual was transformed into a joyful wedding ceremony. In the present day, many years after the legendary incident, we meet a young princess named Meera, who is preparing to marry Igor, the grandson of the Dragon Slayer. Meera romantically imagines being captured by the dragon so that Igor can heroically rescue her. However, her older sister, Yaroslava, dismisses her as an immature girl who still believes in fairy tales and plays with toys. Yaroslava also seems unhappy about the upcoming wedding, prompting Meera to accuse her of being jealous and destined to die an old spinster. The two sisters engage in a heated argument until their father steps in and silences them both. Afterward, Meera is placed on a boat deck in her wedding gown to be sent across the water to her future husband. Meera looks full of excitement, but the scene suddenly cuts to her being snatched away by the dragon and carried to a cave. Her clothes are torn, her body is covered in wounds, and the poor girl is left confused by what the hell just happened. Moments later, Meera tries to climb out of the cave, but she is startled by a strange creature, causing her to lose her balance and fall. The creature seems aggressive and begins growling toward her, making her recoil in fear. She grabs a rock to defend herself, but a man's voice from nearby warns her not to hurt the animal. He tells her to avoid making eye contact with the creature and urges her to lie down instead. Meera hesitantly obeys, after which the creature creeps closer and sniffs her neck before finally leaving the cave. Next, Meera assumes that the man is also a prisoner of the dragon and suggests they come up with a plan to escape the cave. However, the man tells her it's impossible and no prisoner has ever left this place alive. He questions why they sang the song to summon the dragon, to which Meera explains that her fiancé wanted to sing it as a tribute to his grandfather. She then tries to ask more about the place and the dragon, but the man responds that it isn't safe for them to talk. Through a flashback, we see that Meera was on the boat during the ceremony as Igor began pulling her toward him. The villagers were singing the ancient song once used to summon the dragon as a part of their wedding tradition. But tragically, the song actually summoned the dragon, long thought to be dead, and a massive storm broke out. A panicked Igor tried to save his fiancée and kept pulling the boat toward him, but the dragon eventually snatched Meera away and even hurt her with its claws. In the present, the mysterious man hands Meera some ointment and asks her to apply it to her wounds. Through a small opening, Meera catches a glimpse of his handsome face and comments that he doesn't even look like a prisoner, appearing clean and well-fed. The girl introduces herself and asks his name, but he admits he can't remember it. Next, she discovers a necklace belonging to another victim of the dragon, which horrifies her. She tells the man that they must escape, but he refuses, insisting it's too dangerous and that they must wait for the Dragon Slayer. A furious Meera now calls him a coward and begins cutting his long hair to use it as a makeshift rope. Afterward, the man apologizes to Meera, explaining that he isn't a coward, but that the dragon is too strong for them. Meera understands his situation, and she decides to name him Arman as he looks exotic. The man is also pleased by this, and the two shake hands through a small hole in the wall. Suddenly, something bizarre begins to happen, and Arman warns her to hide inside as the beast is approaching. Soon enough, the dragon awakens and begins wreaking havoc in the area. It reaches the front of the cave where Meera is hiding, but the opening is too narrow for the huge beast to get through. The angry dragon thus strikes everything and causes stones to fall dangerously around the poor girl. Meera quickly hides from its sight, and after a tense moment, the dragon finally leaves. Afterward, Meera calls out for Arman, but there's no response from the other side, leaving her worried. She then tries to use her hair to climb out of the cave, but miserably fails. The desperate girl now picks up a large stone and begins striking the hole in the wall. Finally, she manages to create a big passage and heads to the side where Arman had been earlier, but he's nowhere to be found. And Meera is stunned to realize she is on a strange island, which seems to be formed by the bones of a giant monster. Unfortunately, Meera runs into the dragon again, who immediately begins to chase her. The terrified princess begins running away and eventually reaches a high rock, which turns out to be a dead end. While Meera is considering whether to jump or not, suddenly Arman arrives and asks her to be careful, but she notices the strange creature with him, which seems to obey everything Arman says. A terrified Meera hurriedly jumps from the rock, so Arman also plunges after her and manages to catch her. Meera tries desperately to get away from him, but in a shocking twist, Arman suddenly turns red and transforms into a huge dragon, which horrifies her. He manages to save her from falling and lands on the ground, but is brutally injured in the process. Meera's eyes widen in shock when Arman loses consciousness and transforms back into human form. Elsewhere, Igor and his crew are sailing at sea, desperately trying to locate the Dragon's Island to rescue Meera. However, the men quickly realize they have no idea where they are going, and a dense fog obscures their view. One of the men asks Igor about the secret path his grandfather once took, but Igor appears clueless. On the other hand, Meera looks at the unconscious Arman and picks up a stone to kill him, but she can't bring herself to do it, so she decides to leave him in the water, where he will drown. but the strange creature refuses to let that happen. The animal gestures and asks for her help, so she reluctantly drags him to the top of the island. Later, a half-conscious Arman begins muttering that the dragon is a threat to everyone and must be slain by the dragon slayer. Next, Meera heads to the shoreline and desperately calls for help, but no one can hear her cries. She then comes across an old boat washed ashore and decides to use it to escape, but a sudden storm at sea dashes her hopes. She returns to the injured Arman and carefully applies the ointment and bandages his wounds with her sleeves. As she touches him, his body begins to glow red, but she shockingly manages to calm him down by singing a lullaby. The princess also eventually gets tired and falls asleep beside him. The next morning, Meera wakes up with a blanket draped over her and some food by her side, but Arman is nowhere to be seen. She soon spots him fishing at sea and tries to strike up a conversation, but he stays silent. Frustrated, Meera asks why he can't just fly her back home if he truly has good intentions, but the man calmly explains that it's not that simple. Next, Arman begins recounting his life story and reveals how his ancestors have long inhabited the island. He reveals that as a dragon boy, he was allowed to choose whether to stay as a human or become a dragon. One day, he discovered some toys in a chest washed ashore and became fascinated by human life. He thus refused to be a dragon, as he had no desire to hurt people, but this peace lasted until one day a group of people appeared out of nowhere and the dragon slayer murdered his father. That day, Arman became so distraught and enraged that he jumped from a cliff and eventually transformed into a dragon. By embracing his true self, he gained the memories of all his ancestors and was struck by the weight of this legacy. Yet he still chose not to harm humans, even as the dragon's essence within him constantly threatened to overpower his human side. Whenever the dragon awakened while he was in human form, he ran to a narrow cave, one through which a dragon could not escape. He almost managed to stay out of trouble forever, but the song sung at Meera's wedding forced him to transform into a dragon and fly away, just as his ancestors had. Upon hearing all this, Meera is stunned, and Arman explains that the dragon within him awakens every time she touches him, which is why he cannot take her home. He suggests that she stay on the island until Igor arrives to rescue her and defeat the dragon. He further reveals that the island is protected by powerful magic, and only true love can safely guide anyone through the dense fog that surrounds it. During their conversation, Arman suddenly stumbles and falls, but when Meera leans closer, he warns her not to help him, fearing the dragon might awaken. She reassures him that it hasn't emerged yet and notes that his human side is growing stronger. She then decides to teach him how to live as a human in the next few days until Igor arrives. Later, they arrive at the shoreline, where they collect chests and other items that washed ashore from the shipwreck. Meera decides to transform Arman's cave into a proper home and begins decorating it. In the following days, the two work together and manage to turn the cave into a beautiful home. They spend their days playing in the water and joking around, and their bond continues to grow stronger. Gradually, Arman becomes accustomed to being human, and Meera starts to feel comfortable on the island, even getting along with the strange creature. Arman also teaches her a few things, like how to read the winds and appreciate their beauty. One evening, Meera presents Arman with a flute and begins playing a gentle lullaby, which amazes him. In return, he tries to impress her by creating fireworks, and it becomes clear that they have fallen in love. That night, Meera is awakened by a strange sound, and when she rushes to investigate, she is shocked to find Arman in his dragon form. His body glows red, and despite Meera's attempts to calm him, he inadvertently breathes fire, scorching her. However, it turns out to be just a nightmare, and Meera immediately wakes up. Arman is by her side and asks what's wrong, so the terrified girl confides in him about her fear of the dragon. However, Arman gently reassures her that the dragon will never hurt her, which seems to bring her some relief. The next day, Meera is swimming and relaxing while Arman collects some flowers to give her as a token of his love. Suddenly, something stirs inside him, and he almost transforms into a dragon, causing the flowers to be burnt. He somehow manages to regain control, and moments later, Meera approaches him to show off a kite she made. But Arman is annoyed that she seems to be enjoying life on the island more than she should. He asks why Igor hasn't arrived yet, but she remains silent, even though it's clear that she and Igor do not love each other. Later that night, Arman paces restlessly when he spots a boat hidden on the shore. He becomes distraught when he assumes that Meera has been secretly planning to escape. Furious, he confronts her and accuses her of betraying his trust. Meera tries to convince him that's not true, but he's skeptical and recalls how she has been gathering items from the shore to study maps and sending signals with fireworks. Next, Arman leads her to an altar and explains why there are no dead bodies on the island despite the countless victims of dragons. In a shocking twist, he reveals that the young women taken were actually burned alive at the altar. Their ashes were used to create new dragons, and Arman confesses that he was born the same way. He fears that Meera would suffer the same fate if she stayed and urges her to leave. Meera refuses to leave him behind, but an enraged Arman reveals that he can never become a true human and throws away her flute. The next morning, Meera finally sets off with a heavy heart and boards the boat. The strange creature appears deeply saddened and starts chasing her, but Meera tells it to stay here, since it is the only one Arman has left now. That night, we see Igor and his crew still sailing and searching for Meera without any success. Igor begins to fear that she is dead and considers turning back, But his crewmates grow frustrated that he isn't as brave and determined as his grandfather. One of them even comments that Igor doesn't seem to truly love Meera and is marrying her only to claim the title of prince. This enrages Igor so much that he tries to attack the man, but he is stopped by a sudden burst of fireworks in the distance. Moments later, they finally spot Meera's boat in the distance and rescue the princess. When asked what happened, Meera reveals how the dragon took her. She hit a rock, and she ended up stranded alone on the island. They worry about the dragon returning, but Meera assures them that the beast fell off a cliff and died, so it won't be a problem anymore. The next day, Meera is once again getting ready for her wedding with Igor, and she already understands that she doesn't want this marriage. She apologizes to Yaroslava for their earlier fight, so the latter explains that she was skeptical about the wedding because she didn't trust Igor and believed he was marrying Meera only for her title. But now, seeing the lengths he went to rescue her, Yaroslava is convinced that Igor truly loves her sister. Meera is then approached by her father, who gives her advice and urges her to follow her heart. In the next scene, the ceremony begins, and Meera is placed in the boat again while Igor starts pulling her toward him, but she soon realizes that she doesn't love him because her heart only belongs to Arman. Elsewhere, Arman decides to jump off a cliff, as he has decided to end his life. Meanwhile, Meera tells Igor that she doesn't want to marry him and doesn't love him, but he starts boasting about how he saved her from the dragon. Meera declares that this isn't true and also shocks everyone by revealing that she's in love with the dragon. At this moment, Meera begins singing the ancient song to summon once again, which worries everyone. At first, nothing happens, but soon the dragon appears and instantly catches her. An enraged Igor grabs a spear to attack, but one of the villagers restrains him. Meanwhile, Meera's father watches in awe and realizes that this is what his daughter truly wants. In the next scene, the dragon carries Meera back to the island and places her on the altar to burn her. But Meera doesn't seem afraid, so she kisses the dragon and confesses her love. This allows Arman to finally control himself as a dragon, who softens and rests his head on her lap. The scene then cuts to many years later, where Meera and Arman are seen happily married on the island with their little daughter. The little girl asks how she was born, and Meera explains that dragons receive their children from the sky. However, the girl doesn't seem to believe this and comments that her mom doesn't even have wings. After tucking their child into bed, they leave the friendly creature to watch over her and step outside. We then learn that Arman has finally mastered his dragon instincts while still retaining the ability to transform. Meera has become a skilled dragon rider and flies with her husband, proving that he is no longer a threat. The movie ends with Arman shifting back into his human form midair, and the two share a heartfelt kiss. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And don't forget to check out this next video.